Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Susan Panapento. I am ILRAA Class of 85, and I'm Chair of the New York City Board of Collective Bargaining. I will be facilitating today's program. This is part of a series of initiatives called our ILRAA Alumni Association Career Transition Initiative, and it's a Lunch and Learn series. The aim of the program is to support alumni who are re-entering the workforce, navigating a layoff or pivoting in their career. It includes not only a series of webinars like this one on various subjects like job search, recruiting firms, using social media, etc. But they've also been offering, hopefully you've gotten the emails, complimentary headshots in 6 different cities. And later in the program, at the very end, there's a slide that tells you about all the upcoming programs. So today's session, just so you know, is being recorded. It will be uploaded to the ILRAA groups page on Q links, CUE links. That program has not been launched yet, but you should get an email if you've participated in today's program. When it does launch, I encourage you to create a CU Links profile and to connect with the Alumni Association and its programs through that link. The president of the ILRAA, Nicole Mormillo, would love to hear your feedback on not only this program, but the entire career transition initiative. We're here that the ILRAA is here to serve you and our fellow alumni. Your feedback will help Nicole ensure that the organization provides you with the tools and resources you need as you work towards your next career step. You can share your thoughts via email to Cornell, ILRAA, all one word, at Gmail. Cornell, ILRAA at Gmail. So today, our knowledgeable panel is going to cover 3 areas of interviewing: preparation, how to sit for behavioral or structured interviews, as well as traditional interviews, and overall interviewing best practices. I'd like you to submit any questions you have in the chat function, and I will try and pose them to the speakers at appropriate times in the program. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, Amanda Bizon and Jamie Hanlon, to introduce themselves. Jamie, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here today. I graduated ILR in 2003 and then went to law school. And since law school, I spent 14 years at the Social Security Administration, working in a variety of leadership and labor and employee relations roles, where I transitioned then to NYU, working in employee relations, and recently to HarperCollins as employment counsel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda Bizon. I am class of 93, Mylar. I am also the co-chair of the Philadelphia chapter of the ILRAA, and I have over 20 years of experience in HR and life sciences, in the life sciences industry. And recently I joined Inovio Pharmaceuticals as the Vice President of Human Resources, and I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you both. So to get us started, just a few comments about the purpose of interviewing. I think everybody knows, the purpose of an interview is it's your time to shine, so to speak. It's your time to connect your skills to the position that you are seeking. That goal is a goal that you should be seeking to achieve regardless of the type of interview you're sitting for. But we're going to go into kind of a discussion of interviewing methods so that you have a greater understanding of what the interviewers are trying to get out of the interview. And we're going to start off with a description of various interviewing methods. So Amanda, you want to get us started?
Sure, happy to. So today we're going to kind of talk about 2 different methods, traditional and behavior-based. There are others, but these are the most common. So a traditional interview can be structured or unstructured, meaning the interviewer may have a set list of questions they ask every single candidate, or unstructured, the interviewer asks, each candidate different questions based on what they feel is appropriate. And in the traditional interview, they can ask lots of different types of questions. They may ask open-ended questions, such as tell me about yourself. They could ask hypothetical questions. How would you handle a customer service issue? They could pose scenarios to you, give you a scenario, ask you how you would deal with it or address the issue. They can ask resume-based questions, go through your resume, tell me why you left each job. And lastly, they may ask you insight questions. These are some questions that people think give them some type of psychological insight into you. One of the ones I've heard is, if you could ask 3 people to dinner, past or present, who would you invite and why? Contrasting traditional interviewing technique is behavior-based. Behavior-based interviewing is premised on past performance predicts future performance. So it is primarily structured. The interviewer will have an interview guide with questions that they ask every candidate. They might ask some opening and closing questions that are different, unique, more conversational. And they're going to ask you questions for specific examples of past behavior. They usually start with something like, tell me about a time, or give me an example. So tell me about a time you dealt with a difficult customer. And the questions they ask are based on the predetermined skills and competencies that are needed to perform the job and be successful.
So, Amanda, in terms of these 2 different methods that you've explained, are there different ways that the questions should be answered?
Not really. In general, you should answer any question that you're posed, no matter what kind of way it comes from the interviewer, with an example of an experience from your past, even if they don't ask for it. Always be concise in your answers. They can ask more follow-up questions. And don't use a lot of jargon, especially in the behavior-based, where you're trying to describe the situation to the interviewer, and just try to keep relating it back to your past experience and professional experiences or volunteer experiences.
So before we talk about what the interviewer is looking for in these different methods, let's turn to talking about the best practices in terms of actually preparing for interviews. Jamie, what do you think should be done to prepare?
Sure. Thanks, Susan. So I think the first thing that you really want to consider is the job description and what you may have learned about the position as you've been going through the application process, and you're tailoring your experience to the position that you're seeking. For example, what kind of skills are they looking for? Project management, leadership, good resource utilization. And you want to think of examples from your background that you might be able to use during the interview. Of course, it's really critical to research and understand the job before you go into that interview. Kind of thinking more about yourself, have a short opening prepared for if they're asked, tell me about yourself. And that really may come up in both a traditional interview or a behavioral-based interview. Be able to describe your soft skills in a concise manner and what you would bring to the organization to help it be successful and what has made you successful in roles so far. Also, anticipate certain questions that may come up and have examples on the ready. For example, I think a question that we all dread is what part of the job you like the least. So think about that before so you have a thoughtful answer. Also, along those lines, think about what you've learned from your shortcomings and mistakes and be prepared to have an example for that as well. Another topic that is uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of us to discuss is money questions. So think about what response you might have if you're asked what you're looking for in terms of a salary, but also questions that you might then ask at the end of the interview related to that. Overall, think about the questions that you want to ask at the end of the interview when you're asked if there are any questions. And really the purpose of those questions is to demonstrate your interest in the position, in the company, or the organization.
So I think one of the things I heard from both of you is examples, being prepared to give examples of the skills that you possess, not just saying, oh yeah, I'm a good manager, but giving an example of how you were a good manager or something like that. Amanda, in terms of preparation, is there anything you think you can add aside from what Jamie just said?
Yeah, those are all great tips, Amy, or sorry, Jamie. Just a couple things. Most first interviews these days are virtual, so just be prepared for the technology. There's lots of different platforms. So find out, how to use the different platforms once you get the invitation. Some companies are actually using recorded interviews for the first round. So you actually log in, it'll ask you questions, you record your answers, and you submit them. I think this usually goes without saying, but definitely dress professionally regardless of whether your interview is virtual or in person. Um, and then, along with the methods we've talked about, companies are also doing things like doing online assessments or case studies, or even asking individuals to come to be prepared to give a presentation. So just lots of things to think about as you go into the interview process.
I know updating platforms is something that can never be underestimated in terms of
Yes.
frequency. So if
Yes.
the interview link is for WebEx and you don't remember the last time you used WebEx, if you want to be on time, it's best to make sure your
Yes.
platform or your download is updated. Okay, so let's try and turn to the interview itself. I want to talk about answering questions. Um, uh, Amanda, are there actually, I don't know if you can weigh in on this, but are there industries that you think job candidates can expect to see more behavioral type questions versus traditional questions? I know in law, it seems like they're still favoring traditional questions a
Yeah.
little bit more, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a general rule about industries. What I have found is that, sometimes it depends on the size of the company. Larger companies tend to have more resources to develop behavior-based interviewing methodologies and train their interviewers. And it also reduces a lot of risk because you're asking those structured questions. And it could also just be based on sort of the sophistication of the HR department, even in a small company. If the HR department is pretty sophisticated, they may, have trained and ask interviewers to use behavior-based. But there's no, I think rhyme or reason, but, it's good to check out with people in the industry you're interviewing in to see what their experience has been as you go into the process.
And Jamie, with your federal government experience, what do you have any sense, government, what in wider federal government circles or government at all, whether one approach is being used over the other?
So my experience is that only behavioral interviews are used, and kind of what Amanda talked about reducing risk, everyone's getting the same set of questions, et cetera. I think that is something that I generally saw. And as someone who kind of went through the interviewing process in the last year or so, I generally saw more behavior-based questioning. Maybe with a traditional question thrown in here or there, but I would say it is more behavior-based.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about those behavior-based questions then, Amanda. Yeah, what's the best way to answer them?
Oh, sorry. I'm going to catch up. There we go. When they're asking you behavior-based questions, they're looking for three parts to your answer, and the acronym STAR is used to help you think through it. One, they're looking for the situation or task. So describing to the interviewer what happened, what's happening. Did your manager ask you to do something? Did you identify an issue or problem? It provides context. It should be short and sweet. It can be very confusing if you get into a lot of jargon or go into great detail. The biggest part of your answer and what they're listening the most for is the action. So what did you do in response to that request or situation where you identified a problem? And here you want to give specifics so that you can really show your thought process, the soft skills you used, and also, you know, your logic as you went through solving the problem. And lastly, they're looking for you to give a short summary of the result. What was the outcome? What did you learn? So if it was not necessarily a positive outcome, what did you learn from that experience? And again, it should be short, sweet, and concise in terms of giving the result.
So maybe we should try and give some examples of this, or at least compare and contrast, the types of questions. Amanda, you wanna try and start?
Sure. So I'm going to ask Jamie a pretty common traditional question. How do you handle feedback?
I handle it very well. I like feedback.
Okay, so you can see short question, short answer without a lot of detail. So now I'm going to try behavior-based, going towards the same concept. So Jamie, tell me about a time when you received constructive feedback.
Sure. So during my last performance review, when I met with my manager, they provided me some feedback on how I was managing my team. They expressed concerns that I wasn't delegating enough, which left too much on my plate and also was affecting developmental opportunities for my team members. So when I met with my manager, I listened to the feedback and I took detailed notes. I also asked clarifying questions. At the end of our meeting, I thanked my manager for the feedback and said I would be developing a plan for how I can address the issue by the time we next met. During the next few weeks, I reviewed my responsibilities and assignments to see what could be delegated or assigned to another member of the team. And I also took the opportunity to meet with my direct reports to discuss their developmental goals and see what types of assignments they were interested in taking on. I delegated various long-term projects, but I made sure that I established communication channels so that I'd still be in the loop. At my next meeting with my manager, I shared my progress and continued to fill them in throughout the year, and also met with my team regularly to discuss their work. All of the projects and assignments were completed successfully, not separately, and I was able to see 2 of my reports promoted into more senior roles based on the experience they had.
Okay, so hopefully everyone was able to see how Jamie hit all 3 points in that answer. She definitely talked about the situation that she got feedback right from her manager. She also talked about the action that she took as a result of that feedback, and she talked about the result, what happened, and in this case, I think it sounded like it was a positive thing. So she was able to use an example that, showed her skills. Let's try another example. Jamie, do you have one?
Sure. Amanda, are you good at meeting deadlines?
Yes, I always meet my deadlines. I'm very organized and I have excellent time management skills.
Go, Amanda.
Something we all strive for.
Yes.
Can you give me an example of when you met a tight deadline, even though there were things really going on beyond your control?
Sure. Great question. So last year I was given an assignment to make sure a critical delivery was shipment was delivered to a new client who was pretty concerned about the fact that about missing deadlines, missing timelines because of things they had on their end. And so I took responsibility to call all the departments that might impact the ability of that shipment to get to the customer on time: production, shipping, quality. And we sat down and talked about what was the timeline, how they would meet the deadlines to get to the point where we made the shipment and it was received on time. And also, I asked what were major or minor issues that could come up along the way so we could address them in advance. And one of the shipping departments said that there was a holiday, July 4th, in there. And so we needed to make sure we built that into our timeline so that we didn't ship out over the weekend and have issues. So we executed the plan we drafted. The client received the shipment on time and actually then went on and placed orders for the next few quarters, given our great customer service.
Okay, so hopefully all of you in the audience can see the difference between the, both answers address the questions asked, but in the behavioral model, it is far more lengthy of an answer, and also clearly contained the three elements that Amanda described. She gave an example of what they were looking for, meeting deadlines and time management skills. She talked about the action she took to achieve that result, and then she also talked about the result. So it seems that whether the question you're asked is traditional, such as are you good at meeting deadlines, right? Or you're asked in a behavioral or structural format, you can answer in a sense, right, using the STAR method, can you not? Because we were talking earlier about like just give examples, right? That's the best way to connect your skills to the question being asked. So what about, do you think it's more persuasive to use at least the STAR method in answering the questions?
I definitely think it is, whether it's asked in a more traditional format, it really shows that you understand the question and can relate to it and aren't giving that short answer. You're backing your answer up with substance.
Okay, so the one thing that occurred to me, Jamie, is that, it does seem more complicated to answer these questions. Is there anything you can do to make it easier?
Yeah, so what I always recommend to people who I'm working with who are going through the interview process and having a lot of interviewing experience and seeing sometimes where things kind of go amok at times, is take notes. Have a notepad with you that you're writing down the question as it's asked, especially because some of these more behavioral-based interview questions may have multiple parts. So take notes, and also don't hesitate to ask for the question to be repeated if it's a lengthy hypothetical or something along those lines, because that will enable you to make sure you're hitting all the parts. Sometimes when you're interviewing, you may be asked a follow-up on it, and someone may kind of lead you there, but a lot of times, unfortunately, that might not happen. So by you taking these notes, you're able to be sure that you're hitting all of the relevant parts of the question and getting really the maximum amount of credit that you can.
Hey, Amanda, what about, is there anything you can add to what you think makes it easier to answer these types of questions?
Well, I don't know if this is easier because it's something we're probably not in the habit of doing, but in behavior-based interviewing, when you're giving your actions, you want to say what you did. So using I did, I led, I asked, as opposed to the we. So if it was a team effort, that's great, but make sure that you outline what you did, because they're assessing you, the candidate, not the team that worked on the issue or project. And also, as I said, they're looking for those three parts, and they may or may not prompt you, as Jamie said, along the way. So, just be prepared to mentally go through that with them. Because at the end of the time together with the interviewer, they're going to rate your ability to perform the job on that specific area they're asking about based on your stars. So if they don't know, what the result was, they're not going to be able to fully assess whether you can do the job and give you a high score on that competency or behavior. So definitely hit all three parts. If you can, and they should help you along the way, but they may not.
So I just want to make sure that the audience understands what you were saying in terms of that scoring, that
Yes.
that using a behavioral model, sometimes they are actually giving you points for
Yes.
every element of the STARS model that you are hitting in your answer. Is that right?
Yes. if they're trained in it, they're told if you don't get a complete star, you actually should throw out that example and not use it as part of the rating process. So you want to get all the credit you can. So you want to hit all three parts.
Okay. So let's turn to a few back to the traditional model, because I think there's been some mention earlier of some questions that I find that can be challenging for candidates to answer. I'm curious about the question that one of you mentioned regarding inviting, if you could invite three people to dinner, who would they be? Amanda, what do you think the interviewer is looking for on a
Yeah.
question like that? Like, are they looking for your personality traits?
They could be looking for anything because these tend to be very personal questions that they, come up with. But I think sometimes, like that one, they're looking for, can you think on your feet? You can't really prepare because you don't know what that question's going to be. Creativity, and then also your logic about, in that example, why you would invite the various individuals.
Jamie, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really agree with what Amanda said. It's a question that I think I've been thinking about since we first chatted about who my three people would be. But I think I would say, steer away from being too political or anything along those lines. Although, of course, it depends on the job you're interviewing for. Maybe that does fit. But like Amanda said, I think they're looking at creativity, logic, perhaps how the people relate to each other, or whether they don't or not, and could ask follow-up questions based on your answer.
Okay, what about the question, what do you like least about your current position or your last position? Jamie, do you have any ideas on like how it's best to answer that question?
Sure, I think you want to be honest, but not too honest. And you don't want to be negative. You want to really end on a positive. And I think it's helpful if you could be self-reflect on maybe what didn't fit right and why not, but also perhaps how the position that you're interviewing for is different and how this position is you're more well suited for.
Amanda, what about you? What's the best way you think to answer?
Yeah, I'd been given advice, and I recently went through interview processes, and I think it worked well, is to find something in the job posting or description that is not super significant to, how you're going to perform in that job. You don't want to go if it's a recruiting job and say, like, I hate doing interviews, right? So, you may want to say, like, something to the effect of, if I like to work with people, and if the job was solely working alone, I might be less motivated and excited about my job. So that way, you're not coming off with a huge negative. Like Jamie said, you want to end on as much on a positive as you can.
Okay. I just want to remind the audience, you can put questions for the panel in the chat and I'll ask them. So the other question I thought of is, why did you leave your last position? Do either of you have thoughts on how to answer that question, especially if you just experienced like a layoff? I know people feel sensitive about talking about that or something, something like that.
Yeah. I think giving a short but clear answer is always best. And so, for example, in the situation where there was a layoff, saying what the reason was, usually it's the company wants to save money. So, you could say something like the company was experiencing a downturn in revenue, and to contain costs, there was a reduction in force and I was impacted. So you don't have to go into great detail. Sometimes that gets you down a rabbit hole that you end up starting to share things that you don't really want to, and maybe saying things that could be negative reflection on yourself.
Okay. Jamie, you have any other thoughts on that?
It's similar to Amanda, finding something that's true, but concise but trying to be positive. along those lines. And I guess if you haven't been subject to a layoff and you left a position for other reasons, again, considering what's not a key part of this new role to help differentiate why it's different.
And another tip, Susan, just after you give your short, concise answer, just to get that positive end, just to kind of flip it back and say, and I'm just so excited about the future opportunity working at the company that you're interviewing with, so that it kind of gets the interviewer off what you just said might be a negative about being in a riff or, things like that.
Or to Jamie's point, turning it to, I'm really excited about this opportunity because it has this additional
Yes.
thing that I wasn't, doing in the old position, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So what about folks who are returning to the job market after perhaps a lapse of time? They
Mhm.
were out of the job market for whatever reason. People are out of the job market for all sorts of reasons. Are there ways to describe your skills that will be acceptable to prospective employers despite those lapses of time? Amanda, you want to?
Yeah, you should be using examples from throughout your career. So, you can definitely use examples before you left the work world. Um, and also while you were out, you can use examples of things that you may have done or experienced. So did you volunteer? Did you coach a basketball team or any sorts of volunteer activities. That way that you can, what the issue is with behavior-based interviews is they want to see how you have used the skill. They're not usually as concerned about where or in what type of situation you used it.
All right. Jamie, can you think of anything else that, could demonstrate the skills that are being sought by the interviewer?
I think don't hesitate to use a hypothetical. It may give you some time to think of actual experience, but also if you don't have that experience, you could say what you would do if faced with that situation. For example, I have interviewed over the years a lot of people for different management positions, and there would be questions about how you would deal with someone who was having difficulty at work, kind of a performance management question. And if you didn't have that experience, I think people were still successful getting those points that we talked about with the behavioral based interview question if they were able to talk about how they would have handled the situation, kind of answering that situation, task, action, result.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Great point. Amanda, do you have anything else on that point?
Um, not really. I think the best way to try to, avoid kind of not having an answer is that preparation, as Jamie talked about at the beginning. Really sitting down with that job posting and going through it so that you can think about in each of those points they may have what you have done around that. But a hypothetical is always good. Like Jamie said, it can buy you a little time because you have experience. We always do in some way, shape, or form. Even if, for example, what Jamie said about management, it might be about peer coaching or coaching, your child's soccer team and how did you, coach, handle feedback, things like that. So, preparation always the key if you can do it in advance.
All right, I want to loop back for a minute because we have a question about what we were talking about earlier in terms of having left a job. The question is, if someone left their job due to a lack of alignment with the immediate boss and is in transition, how should they communicate that they were not aligned with the vision of the company when they left? Any thoughts on that?
I,
It's a good question.
It's a great question. And, I'll give you my thoughts and then Jamie, please. But I think, you don't want to go negative, right? And say, I didn't align. I think, keeping it short and simple, saying, I'm looking for an opportunity where I am aligned with the vision of the organization and I have opportunities to grow. My last role didn't offer me those opportunities. So short, sweet, positive as much as possible.
Jamie, you have a thought?
Nothing really to add on what Amanda said. Again, kind of focusing on the positive and talking about how this new role is likely a better fit for you.
I think, Susan, just a couple things to think about there is that, you know, even if that company does a a check of your employment, they're not going to give, you know, usually why you left or any issues or problems you may have experienced. So if you weren't getting along with your supervisor, your former company's not going to say that. Um, so, you know, I think it's okay to, you know, just be more generic on the reasons that you left and give more of that positive answer.
Do you think it's okay? And I know you said that, you know, you would shy away from saying like, you know, didn't feel like I was aligned with my supervisor.
Mhm.
Do you think it's okay to really just keep it more personal and say like, you know, I just felt like it wasn't a good fit for me?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you want to be truthful enough that you don't feel like you're lying, right? Like you don't, because then you come across, you know, people can tell you get flushed and things. So I do think keeping it personal and short, like you said, I didn't feel aligned with, you know, how my department was functioning. Things like that, something simple.
Um, Okay, so we have another really good question, and I have no idea how to answer this. So the audience member says, I'm concerned that the interviewer might consider mention of a layoff, a business downturn as a standard answer and discount my response. I also have a non-compete, and I hesitate to provide additional details during the interview. Any advice on that? That's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, I can help a little bit here. In terms of the non-compete, you know, make sure you know the terms of it really well before you go interviewing. So if it would like you're interviewing at a direct competitor and you know that you couldn't start there until after a certain date, you know, be knowledgeable of that, make sure that it does fit in the right timeline. Sometimes you can call your old company and ask for a waiver. I know as an HR leader, you know, if I laid somebody off, I didn't want them to go without a job. So as long as it wasn't, you know, something that would damage our company, we would sometimes provide a waiver. Um, if it's a short period of time, you know, then, you know, tell the company when you're available to start. And at some point in the in the application process, you will probably be asked if you have any, you know, non-competes included, and you'd want to be upfront about that because sometimes the company can also help work around that in terms of hiring you into a different role until your non-compete expires and then moving you into the desired role. So don't let that scare you off, but just be super knowledgeable about the terms of it because you don't want to violate it and your new company doesn't want to assist in a violation. Obviously, they want you to be true to it. Um, and you know, RIFs as a standard reason, I think if it is why you left, then I think you should be honest and say that. And you know, you know, I'm not sure what else you could say. You know, if you want to say I left because I was, you know, the company was going through economic downturn and there were rifts and not necessarily say you were impacted. Again, I don't think they're going to check that out and get any confirmation or negative information from your former company. But I think honesty about that is the best policy. It's happening everywhere. So it's not as much of a reflection on you or us or me as a negative as it used to be, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Oh. Jamie, any other thoughts?
No, like,
No.
you know, and I really agree with Amanda, what you just said, and Susan, what you agreed with is that it's not, I don't see it as a reflection on someone I'm interviewing. And I think being honest with that is helpful.
So we have another question, if about, if you left the previous job due to poor management, how would you recommend talking about that when asked? The question is posed by someone who said they once honestly discussed how I tried to improve a micromanagement situation. Is that, fair game?
Jamie, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I think it could work. Depending if you're in a behavioral based interview question and there's a question about, how you work to improve a relationship or address something, I think addressing that. But again, kind of what we've been focusing on is trying to get to the positive. Hopefully that the relationship improved, things you did to maybe make your management be less of a micromanager. Ultimately, sometimes that doesn't work, right? And the situation doesn't change. So I think it's really thinking about who you're interviewing with and kind of if there's the right way to introduce that in the conversation. But Amanda, I would definitely turn to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because if you use that example and the person you're interviewing is a micromanager and you don't know it, because most managers aren't going to say, "Hi, I'm a micromanager. How are you? Let's talk, today about this job." So, I think again, being a little more generic and saying that, I feel like I outgrew um, the the management within my function, and I'm looking for an opportunity where I can work independently or where I can, have more decision making, whatever kind of the issue is. But I think again, in some industries, I'm in life sciences, it's a huge industry, but yet it's so small. You don't, that person could end up somehow finding out who your former manager was. And I think it just makes that interviewer maybe feel like, ooh, they're talking badly about their former manager. So I think trying to find a way that you're honest with yourself so you come across as credible, but just saying that I was looking for something different. And I think that it sounds like that's going to be the opportunity here.
Yeah, I totally agree, Amanda. Kind of, going back to, I think what I mentioned before in terms of like going with the personal, like
Yeah.
I've decided that I'm looking for an opportunity where I have more discretion or more independence or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so what about, are there other things that you think it's important to try and get across in the interviewer, that may not be kind of the skill, the hard skills, right? But more of soft skills, showing more of your personality. What are your thoughts on that? Is that good? Is it bad?
I think if
Jamie?
it's helpful that if you have, obviously depending on what the position is, but using those questions to kind of overall, without really saying these are my soft skills, but maybe talk about your examples or focusing on communication and how communication is critical to you depending on the position through those examples that you're providing and getting those across. That's one way that I have seen it done that I think is successful. Is kind of tailoring your examples to bringing in those soft skills.
Yeah, I
Amanda?
agree. Yeah, I agree. When you're doing those actions, talk about, how you did those actions. Were you inclusive and collaborative? Did you use great communication skills? And then also how you come across in the interview will let them know about your personality as well. So, I think try to be as true to yourself in the interview, so that, you're relaxed, the interviewer gets a sense of how you communicate, um, and if you would be a good fit for the organization.
Okay, let's go on to something that I don't think we've talked about at all in depth, and that's about appropriate questions for you as a candidate to ask. Amanda, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think some of it depends on the type of job you're interviewing for, the industry, things like that. You'll want to tailor somewhat to that. But I think asking about the future of the company, the strategy that they're going for, the culture. Um, I ask that question as an HR person all the time. And sometimes in that answer, it's what you don't hear that's almost more important than what you do hear from the interviewer when you ask what the culture is, or a twist on it, like what would you like the culture to be. It gives you a lot of information about whether you're going to be a fit within the organization and happy. Because at the end of the day, you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you, and you want to be a good fit and you want the company to be a good fit with you.
Jamie, you have any other
Yeah, but
questions to ask?
yes, building on Amanda's answer, one question that I recently went through the interview process a few times. So this is kind of me on the other side, not interviewing or not being the interviewer. But one question that I thought that I got really helpful information on that showed me kind of the culture of what Amanda was going to was when I met with a CHRO, asking what her goals were for the organization, for her HR organization in the next year. And I thought that was really instructive, especially Amanda, what you were just saying, seeing if it was a company that worked for me. And I just thought it was a great question. And I think it also showed the interviewer that I was interested in goals and how then I could help her accomplish those goals. And my favorite new question that I asked is, and I've asked this several times and really to different levels and layers of interview as you go through the interviewing process. Oftentimes you're interviewing with several people at different levels in an organization, is if I have a great first year, what will I have accomplished? How do you define success in that year? And similar to the first question, it really, I learned about the goals of the organization, and really what the position was for. And you get different answers with different people you interviewed, but then when you have the same answer, you could really see the cohesion there.
I think those are really interesting. It would seem that either question would elicit a response that you as a candidate get like a bit of a preview, right, of what you're getting into, even just work-wise. Like the next big project is, or, like, well, we have this tremendous backlog of whatever. And, if you're coming from someplace where you just dug out of a backlog, maybe that's not like the right fit for you, right? Okay, I think we have another question from the audience. Let me just get into it. Do you have any suggestions for someone who has been working in one focus area and or industry for a number of years and is considering interviewing for positions in another area or industry? In addition to focusing on transferable skills, is it helpful to share examples that show you are a quick learner? Who wants to take that?
Amanda, I'll defer to you on that one.
Okay. Yeah, if you're switching industries, basic skills usually apply across industries: communication, collaboration, creativity,
Project management, right?
project management, time management. So, one, learn a lot about what's important in the new industry, and then definitely use the examples from your past experience. Because again, it's not so much about, for me, like, did I implement a comp plan in a pharmaceutical company? The pharmaceutical company part may not be that important. It's really about, have I ever implemented a compensation plan? So use examples and really just focus on those skills, and how you applied them in your actions. And I apologize. What was the second part of the
Oh,
question?
sorry.
That's okay.
The second part of it was, in addition to focusing on transferable skills, is
Yep.
it helpful to share examples that show you're a quick learner?
Yes,
I would think yes.
I think so. They may ask you for, it's a popular question. Tell me about a time you made a mistake, or tell me, the traditional question, tell me about your greatest weakness. Um, and I think in those types of questions and in other types of questions, it's an opportunity to say, hey, I made a mistake in coding while I was doing this project, but what I learned from and how I applied it differently is X, Y, and Z. And the next time I had that same type of work, I didn't make that mistake. Or you can use examples of learning, going to training programs, webinars, seminars, and what you have picked up from that and how you think you can apply it in the future. So quick learning is a really valuable skill. So I highly recommend that being in your answers.
So we have a follow-up question from the audience member who asked us about dealing with a prior experience involving micromanager that has an interesting twist because it's about references, which
Yes.
we didn't really talk about at all.
Mhm.
So our audience member is saying basically, in this position where they experienced a manager who was micromanaging, they
Mhm.
had that manager, but they also had another one. And so they're wondering basically if you cannot share the one manager, as a reference and only, the one who was not micromanaging. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I have mine in my experience, but Jamie, you want to go first, or do you have
Sure. I
thoughts?
mean, I think it depends on really what you're being asked for in references. Is there a lot of specificity in the name in the kind of the names that you're being asked for? But my recent experience is being asked for a few references, and it hasn't necessarily been very specific. So I think in that
Mhm.
situation, you definitely can, and I would hopefully you'll have another, perhaps if they want more than one reference from a different position. So that way you're really kind of giving different references across your experience. And that might be what I would recommend doing anyway, rather than two references from that same exact position.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would agree. I would definitely agree with that. I think also like it is important to reach out to your references, right? To say that you're
Yes.
listing them. But I think it's also important to kind of think about what the new position is going to ask those references in terms of what we started with, which is what are the skills? What are the skills they are looking for? So that the reference you're listing, right, is going to be able to
Yes.
say something positive
Yes.
about those skills that they are looking for. I know in my experience calling references, that is not always the case. Like you
Yeah.
do get people who say like, well, I can't speak to that because they didn't do that,
Yeah.
right, in the position that I supervised them in. Or even worse, well, they weren't the greatest
Yeah.
doing that. Yeah, so you do want to be careful, on the references. We've got a bunch of other questions that I
Okay.
really want to try and get into.
Yeah.
The next one is, I've always worked in tech or financial service industries. How do I target HR roles in a different industry, in like pharma or hospitals? And how do I show that my skills are transferable? Any ideas on that? Amanda, you want to take it?
Yeah, some industries and pharmaceuticals have a history of this. They really want people with experience in that industry. So I think the best way to break in is, you know, look at your network. You might not know somebody who works at pharmaceuticals, life sciences, but maybe you're a second degree away in LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an excellent resource. Start connecting with HR people in the life sciences industry, in pharmaceuticals, talk to them, ask for a 5-minute introductory conversation, a quick 15-minute coffee networking meeting in the morning, and get them your resume, get talking to them. They will help get you into the HR department once, if they have a position open, they'll know a position's open. And, if you get the interview, then definitely, talk about how the skills that they ask about, how you demonstrated them. And it's really, about I did, project management. And all the steps in it. It's not so much about that story of the situation that was going on or the company. So I think getting into a new industry is networking is your best bet to break through that.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I think that it's important in that networking to be gaining, right, information about the new industry, right? So
Yes.
that when you are being interviewed, right, you are linking your past experience
Yep.
to the new part, and you're demonstrating knowledge that, like, I get it. I get
Yep.
it that this industry is unique because,
Yes.
right?
And another quick tip, LinkedIn can be your best friend. It can be a nightmare too when you get a little overwhelmed with it, but there are tons of groups out there, and joining one or two or a newsletter from the industry you're interested in, that's an easy way when you log in every day to LinkedIn to see what's happening, so that even though you didn't work at some company, you know what's happening there, because you're following them, or because you've read articles about what's happening in the industry.
Jamie, you have anything to add? You made an industry switch.
Yeah, I did, and really not much to add based on what Amanda did. It was a challenge, I will say, but it was definitely kind of finding the right position, and maybe I think right now I've made a big industry switch, and at first it was somewhat of a little industry switch, so kind of having that in the middle, but looking for really my experience and skills to bring up in the interviewing, that while I may not have, example, done a lot of private sector labor work, really how my public sector labor work, for example, translated over, and the similarities there.
Okay, we've got another really good question about references again, something we didn't think about when we were
Yeah.
preparing for this. So the question is essentially whether or not it's okay to use older references. In other words, the person has been at a job for 3 to 5 years. Can they list a reference from a job, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or whatever? Thoughts on that?
I think it
Yeah.
can be a secondary reference, but I definitely think you want to have some more current references as well. And a lot of times the position may specifically ask for certain things, or um, my question is actually whom to use as references.
Oh,
I
when my
think
previous ones are older. I don't, actually, you want to clarify that again? Because I don't understand that. Whom to use is right when my previous ones are older. CB, you want to clarify it one more time? From jobs 5+ years ago.
Yeah. I think, yes, especially if you've had a break in, work and you're re-entering. I think, I still use a manager, when that I had from 15 years ago. But again, as Jamie said, if you can mix and mingle those in with people who, are more recent, I think showing, over your whole history can be fine. Some places just ask for three and that's all they want. And so, the more current they are, the better. But if you know that person's going to give you a good reference, they know you well, I don't think it's an issue to include them in the list.
What about trying to give context to the references, in terms of like, uh, I'm listing, someone from my current employer, but, in this past position, I did, X, fill in the blank. I had X responsibility, which I know is something you're looking for,
Yeah.
to explain. Do you think that's okay or no?
I mean, I think it's fine, but what I have discovered just during my search, and Jamie, please feel free to jump in here, is a lot of times when it comes to the references, you're filling them out online in some kind of a
Mm.
system for a third party, and they literally ask, name of the company, a telephone number, and an email. And in fact, I'll just give you an example for this job that I'm in now that I started yesterday. I gave them the contact person because I knew they used an automated system, and I didn't, you can't get much information out of the automated systems. they still call or try to get through to the automated system. So if you talk to a person and they ask for your references, yes, you can, give them context about what you did there, who your reference is, things like that. But you may find in some industries and with some companies, you don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, and a
Oh,
lot of time your references, they're really looking to verify your dates of employment, and kind of whether you left in good standing. So it's very, I would say, industry specific about the kind of types of references that are happening. For example, if it's happening as part of a background check, I would say it's a little different than if it's, someone you've interviewed with that's calling.
okay, I think that's good. So we're actually running out of time if we haven't run out already. But I do want to get in our last question because I think it is important. It's very quick, and that is, what about thank you notes? Is that a thing of the past? Should the applicants be writing thank you notes? Thoughts?
I think it's helpful to send a short email afterwards, very quick, a few sentences, thanking someone for taking the time to meet with you. And I think it can definitely and should be an email. You don't have to send a snail mail card
Yes.
anymore.
No
And
fine stationery required.
exactly.
I agree. I think, just sending a quick thank you to each interviewer saying, I appreciate your time. I appreciate, you know, the information you shared with me with the company, and I'm really excited. It doesn't have to be paragraphs in length. And it just, they may respond, they may not, some may not even open them, but it shows you took the time. And I think that that's always a positive, you know, thing to do.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it. We're out of time.
Okay.
I really want to thank both Amanda and Jamie for volunteering to do this on their own time. They both have new jobs, so it was particularly challenging. Um, I want to thank the audience for participating. We had great attendance. I hope it's been a helpful information session for you. And Amanda, on the closing screen, is going to show you the upcoming webinars on the Career Transition
I,
Initiative, and I hope you'll join us. Oh,
yeah,
what's wrong?
I do apologize. I am having a technical issue and could not figure out how to share my screen anymore. So I do apologize.
All right. Well,
Uh,
hopefully you're getting the emails
yes.
that say there are upcoming seminars in both April and May. I know that, and apologies to everyone for
Yes.
our technical
I do.
mishap.
I really apologize. And in fact, for the people who have questions about layoffs, the next session is April 9th. It's layoffs and layoffs 101 and employment agreements.
Okay.
So please do look for the announcements on LinkedIn. And I really apologize.
It's okay.
Newbie at the company and with the new technologies. So have a great day.
Yeah, just before we go, somebody's asking about sharing the recording. As I think I said it at the start, the recording is going to be available on CU links, Q links. It's just not available currently. The ILRAA portion of Q links is not live yet, but it will be shortly, and hopefully you'll get an email telling you that. Okay.
You will get a thank you email from someone within the ILRAA, and they will attach this recording to it for those who attended today. So you will be able to see, the slides and view it. And I believe you can even pass it along, but we will work on the CU links as soon as possible.
Okay. Thank you both very much, and thank you to the audience.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.